This episode is months in the making, so I am thrilled to welcome my guest today. So esteemed that I have notes. I don't always, actually almost never have notes of their background and their accomplishment. So for all that are watching, you will see me reading off my cheat sheets. But Leonard Finegold, welcome to Leverage.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh
Happy
my
to
God,
be here.
I am so thrilled to have you. So Leonard leads the Cambridge LLP's construction law group. He's senior counsel with them, and he brings over 35 years of experience. And I am so thrilled to have such an expert on because Len has touched so many parts of the business that he can bring such a wealth of knowledge and will bring such a wealth of knowledge to this episode that I'm so excited to get into it. But I just want to touch on a couple of his accolades. He's the founding fellow of the Canadian College of Construction Lawyers, and he's a former co-chair of the General Contractor section of the Toronto Construction Association. And not only that, but he's also contributed as a co-editor of a handbook for executives called Construction Act of Ontario. So not only does he have experience, not only has he written law and legislation, but he's here to tell us all about what we need to know if we plan to, well, renovate, hire someone. Gosh, we're going to cover all of it. So
Yes, we will. There's a lot to go on today.
we have a lot to talk about. All right, so Len, tell us, how long have you been practicing law?
A little longer than 35 years.
Okay.
Almost 40 years now, actually.
And you had your, where did you get your law degree? Not that it ever matters, but I think it's always interesting as someone as esteemed as you. Where did you?
Well, thank you. Actually, I grew up in Montreal, and I went to McGill for my undergraduate degree and my law degree. I have two law degrees, one in the civil law element for Quebec and common law for the rest of Canada. And then I left Montreal and came to Toronto and did my bar ads here and became a lawyer sometime around 1980.
Okay, all right. That sounds about right for
that's about right. And
Quebec to Toronto transition, yeah.
And yes, it would be. And as we'll get into, I have a very interesting, eclectic checkerboard route to where I am today in terms of various roles that I played right out of becoming a lawyer, a licensed lawyer, rather interestingly.
Yeah, I think that your background is so interesting. And again, there are a lot of people that I speak to in this industry who have a very laser focused, incredible experience, don't get me wrong, but have kind of touched this one silo. And I just love the breadth of your experience and what you've dealt with. So, first of all, what kind of drew you to specializing in construction law? What was it that got you there?
It's a great question. It was incidental. I didn't plan to be a construction lawyer. I did plan to be a lawyer. Okay. But as it turned out, after I graduated and became a lawyer in the early years, I found myself living in Elliott Lake.
Oh my God, I'm dating myself that I know that.
Yeah, no kidding. And it turned out, for a variety of reasons, I moved up there. I became a lawyer for the mining company that was building and renovating a construction uranium mine back then. Huge dollars, and they needed a young lawyer to monitor the construction, to monitor the contracts, to be involved in all the meetings with the trade contractors, because they had their own construction management team of 35 to 40 groups of people, project managers, contract managers, and I was responsible for overseeing, managing, curating all the contracts. At the time, the Occupational Health and Safety Act just came into being.
Wow.
And so no one knew what the hell that was about.
Really?
Can I say that?
Really?
And so it was fascinating because no one really wanted to wear hard hats or safety goggles or hard boots.
Yeah, let's all remember we didn't wear seatbelts in the 80s.
Exactly. So that was all part of my responsibility. So I learned from that very critically, and also I learned how to resolve disputes, because there were millions of dollars worth of disputes at the end of the day. So I participated in negotiating and settling a number of disputes. So that took me to 3 years.
So how old were you then in Elliott Lake doing all of that? How old were you as a young lawyer?
Do you have a calculator? I I probably went there when I was 28 years old, and I left when I was 33.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah, 3 years, 4 years, 31, 33, yeah.
Wow,
for
what
sure.
an accomplishment
I can't
in
even
such
go
a
back
year.
that far. I can't remember.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness.
I know kids whose, like parents whose kids are still articling at that point, right?
Well, the wonderful thing is my oldest son was born in Elliott Lake, and he keeps on telling me on his birth certificate, people say, "Where is Elliott Lake in the world?" Because he lives in the States now. So
right.
yeah,
for sure the States wouldn't know where
they would never know where it is. So it's kind of a fun thing. So so for then, that period of time, I was acting for an owner, developer, for the huge development, and then I actually moved back to Toronto to become an in-house lawyer for a very large mechanical electrical subcontractor who I defeated in a dispute resolution up in Elliott Lake. And so he said, after we settled, he says, "You're coming to join me."
You got recruited
I
for
got
your hard
recruited.
work.
He said, "You're coming down, you're coming doing that." I said, "Oh, that's great."
Sure, why not?
That's fantastic. So I moved my family, went to Toronto, and I worked with them for a little bit as a subcontractor, lawyer in-house. And then the opportunity came up for me to join one of the largest then general contractors in Canada, which is Ellis Don Construction. Everybody probably knows them. So they recruited me, I joined them, and I was with them for about 5 or 6 years, but during the critical years of the construction of the Sky Dome, as it then was, now it's the Rogers Centre. I have great memories about that time and crazy memories, and it wasn't an easy time.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna have to do an episode just on that.
It was
to be involved in the.
It was absolutely fantastic.
And the Sky Dome was like.
It was a big deal, and particularly there was a very long strike of carpenters during that period of time. So all that got involved. There was a huge fire, it almost burned down the Sky Dome at the time.
Oh my God, they did. There was
crazy.
So much involved in that.
But I have to tell you, on a personal note, my highlight when I took my 2 kids that were alive at the time, I took them during the strike.
Yeah.
We were allowed to go on the field, and we tried to figure out where the home plate was. And I took a picture of my kids and myself at the home plate. We're pretty close, which they now have on their walls at home.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
Very good thing. That was kind of fun.
So like moving up to today, being in, I guess what you would say is private practice now. Would you classify that
Yes,
as private practice? Thank
absolutely.
What would you say it was like your favorite, like, because you've dealt, like, as you mentioned, like you've dealt with architects, you've dealt with contractors, you've dealt with huge developers, you've dealt with individual homeowners. What would you say is like, where you really kind of like felt the most excited, like that you really enjoyed the most?
It turns out, as time passed by, that my expertise became really significant problem solver. I always called myself a triage lawyer because the nature of the work in construction is always imperative, it's always urgent. People always come at the last minute. Everybody tries to solve their problems on their own. No one wants to hire a lawyer, too many headaches, too expensive. And by the time they knock on my door, "Can you help us?" "Oh my God.
We're in so much trouble.
We're in so much trouble." "And what's your timeline?" Tomorrow."
Yeah.
Okay, so oh my God. And truly, it can be tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I seem to have a knack of resolving problems rather uniquely, and try to get to the guts of the problem as quickly as possible and get people out of trouble quickly as with the least expense possible. But sometimes you just can't avoid that happening. I have some cases that I've resolved that took 10 years to resolve. I'm on a case now that is in its 12th year. Like, it's not constant, it's just there's delays, a year goes by, people die, people move on, people leave. It just drags and drags and drags on. Meanwhile, the clock ticks away and the money ticks away. Yeah, money, it's really challenging.
And I feel like I definitely don't want to jump ahead because, one of the things that we talked about addressing in this episode is like, when do you know to litigate and what really happens in litigation? I mean, again, not getting sidetracked, but, a lot of the work in real estate, as you know, is contract work. And by the way, I will remember in my first year being an agent many, many moons ago and looking at these contracts going, I don't think it's okay that they're leaving, legal documents in the hands of someone that just did this like really, I was really not, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm here now responsible for putting legal contracts in front of, people to sign them and give them advice. You're not allowed to give legal advice. I do not give legal advice, but I know a lot of real estate lawyers, not yourself, I'm not speaking. I deal with the ones that will deal with a client before an agreement of purchase and sale is done, but I have come across a lot of real estate lawyers who are like, let me know when it's signed and the deal's done, and I'll take a look at it and I'll give you, we'll move forward. And I think that, experience that you have in understanding all the complexities that go on with, like, on the other side of the construction part of it is so key to that homeowner. And you have so much breadth of experience in other areas. But if you're okay with it, we're going to talk about homeowners today.
Sure.
And your advice
Happy to
with
do
them,
so.
if you're okay with that.
Well, not giving legal advice, just
No, we're
general
not going to
advice.
give. Yeah, we'll have to put a
that's
disclaimer.
okay.
We'll tell Max to put a disclaimer. This is, how they say, like, this is not medical advice. Seek your own.
Exactly.
Yes, for sure. So kind of getting into that, when we were talking about it, obviously everything in the episodes kind of, get wrapped back into residential real estate, which is what I do. And I have a lot of clients, off and on over the year, that will call me and say, you know what, we've kind of outgrown our home. We're thinking about moving. We're not sure. We really love our home. We love our neighborhood. I was, by the way, one of those people. I remember I live in the same neighborhood we've lived in for almost 20 years. We were outgrowing our house. It was a good house. We actually, and we thought, should we put an addition on? Should we build on this house? Should we renovate, or should we move? And, they will have me come and say, what do you think my house value is right now if we were to sell? And if we were to buy X, Y, and Z of our next house, what would that delta be, right? Like, what are we taking on in a new mortgage to move on? And then they do their due diligence. And part of that due diligence does not involve me, and that is speaking to contractors. So in your expert opinion, Len, when do you select that contractor? Like, at what point in that journey of, I might want to do some renovations, I might want to build, let's even say, sure, a brand new house, which I find sometimes that becomes the evolution, right? Like, I think, and this happens to me also, you can tell me if I'm wrong, they have one idea of what's going to happen, then they start talking to the experts and they're like, oh, I had no idea that's a possibility. Right? So they might think that they were only going to do a renovation, and then the next thing you know, the guy says, it's not worth even putting an addition on it. Why don't you just take it down to the ground and build new? So when do you engage that contractor?
Great question. Not an easy answer.
Okay.
And I say that by letting me backtrack a bit to what you're saying.
Please,
it's kind
that
of
was
important,
a lot. Yeah.
Because it all starts when, at the breakfast table they're saying, let's renovate, or the house is too big, the house is too small, we got to go somewhere different.
Exactly.
So where do we go? Before you even think about a contractor, you really need to think about what your budget is. Like, it really is critical. What area you want to live in, what size home you want to live in, and what type of amenities do you want to have. Okay, because it really, at the end of the day, when you go to looking for a contractor, contractors are there to make money. They're their business. If you want a $150,000 renovation, they're not going to take it on. If you want a $5 million renovation or
They'll
a home,
be lining up
they'll
at the
be
door.
lining up at the door for sure. Okay, and they're looking for that $1 million profit. Okay, I say that facetiously, but clearly they're looking for themselves and pretending to be your best friend. And the trouble is, you want the contractor who will be your best friend, frankly.
Yeah, who genuinely wants the best for you, who's going to look out for you. Yeah, absolutely.
And I built homes, and I'm in the process now of building a home in a foreign land right now, so I understand the process, and I'm doing the process. So it really is critical. I mean, all I could say at the very beginning, I'll say at the very end, that relationships and communications with your consultants, with your architect, with your contractor, just trumps everything. It really does. Because if you can't get along, there's going to be problems from the get-go, from negotiating the contract. Okay, you need to have the confidence and faith and trust. Not perfect. Nothing's ever perfect. Okay, but
I call them the perfect 8.5s.
That's
right?
good. If you get that, that's amazing.
Exactly. That's why it's a perfect 8.5.
Go with your gut. And a lot of the work I do is institutional, commercial, industrial, high-rise buildings, hospitals, TTC subway lines. All these people are involved in that process. Those who are really interested, they have it part of their business to be in this. They understand the game, and they know where their weaknesses are and where to look behind the rocks. If you're a homeowner and you want to start, you're excited, you want to build, you want to move, you have the pressures, and you have most people don't have experience doing this. And so you do need to get comfortable. You don't always have to hire a lawyer right away, not just yet until you get to the contractual stage, and then you have to consider hiring a lawyer.
Okay, that's actually very interesting. I think that a lot of people sign, and again, going back to the contract of a real estate agent, is a lot of people do not involve a lawyer because, again, it's that P&L. Like, okay, I have a budget and we're trying to, save at every spot. And if you're doing that, you're going to lose in the end. So I think that's I think that we're stopping and really repeating to saying that when you get to a contract point of a contractor or whoever it is, that you engage a lawyer because, listen, this is why pre-cons have a 3-day cooling off period, right?
I'll tell you the reasons why when we get there.
Okay, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
So at the very beginning, you're very excited, which is great. You want to look for your design and everything else. And your budget. Budget is critical, obviously, at the end of the day, because the budget will ultimately lead to the type of contractor who will be interested in doing your work. Renovations, as you know, today are becoming more popular. Buying new homes, particularly in the GTA and surrounding region, getting more complicated, more expensive. People can't afford, so they're looking at, as you were saying earlier, do I buy new or do I renovate? Do I put on a second floor? What do I do? And renovations tend to be more complicated, and when I say more complicated, understand to be more expensive, and also understand to be more aggravating. It's easier to build from scratch and build up, and watch it go.
More control.
Renovation, you're dealing with what's behind it. Is it a 150-year-old house? Is it a 10-year-old house? What are the problems? Does it have asbestos in it? What's the concrete? What's the foundation?
You'll never know until you demo.
You'll never know until you demo, or you have some pre-construction surveys done with quality surveyors who know what they're looking at. Just as a simple example, not too long ago, I was retained by a bunch of homeowners where the neighbor was a large developer putting in a high-rise, and they were doing these strengthening for the walls underneath, and they had to put a big steel rod underneath all the homes.
For what, sorry? What was the reason?
It's called tieback systems, where you're building a big high-rise, you have a big hole. Okay, rather than all the other lands falling in, you have to brace all the walls around. And to do that, you have to go underneath other homes. And so the homes I was retained by, those homes were built 150 years back, and the foundation were made out of sandstone, which would crumble in vibration. Yeah, so, big problem.
But hold on, how did that build get approved so close to those townhomes, though? Is there not some kind of I don't know, fail safe with when they go to the?
There is.
Okay.
There is, and that's why you hire a lawyer like myself. Okay, and the big developer who was there, they when they knew that I was retained by the 6 homeowners, because it would be going under 6. Actually, they're amazing. One of the top developer builders in Toronto. Mm-hmm. We worked together. We drafted an agreement for protection and for monitoring vibrations. In the event there was a problem, they would be there within 24 hours or sooner. They'd take care of the problem, and they would pay for everything. I mean, all that was in a very complex, trust me, a complex document, but they signed on it, plus insurance. Right. As it turned out, within the first 24 hours of their doing the vibration work and under it, I got a call at 3 o'clock in the morning.
What was it?
It all moved. No, the homes moved. Yeah, the whole moved.
Well, if that's what the foundation is, how did they expect anything else?
Well, that's probably true. So at the end of the day, 3 o'clock in the morning, I called the contact that I was asked to call. They were there in hours. They fixed the problem. They paid for the problem. Everything was fine. Didn't hear from anybody ever again.
Oh my Lord. I mean, really, there are so many horror stories. And by the way, I really also want to point out, because, we talk about 150,000 versus 5 million. I have clients of all price points.
For sure.
And I can tell you stories from every single one of them.
I'm sure you can.
So just because, and this is not to say that, high end versus low end, there's better or worse. I think, like you said, finding the right person that works for you, because there are salt of the earth people that do $150,000 renovations, and same with high end ones, and bad on either side. But yeah, there's a lot to think about before you get into that. And there's people who, like, I hate to say this, but like, you also, I think, let's look on the human side of it. I know we're talking legal also, but this is one of the things that I always say to my clients, and this is not about me, it's just something you have to think about. Are you the type of personality? Is your marriage the type of personality? And dynamic and family dynamic? Like, are you super busy? Are you, like, all of that stuff that you want to live through that process?
That's a nice
Even if you have, that's a nice way of putting it, I know.
Yeah,
but like, that's really, I think they get excited about, like, going to Gingers and picking out fixtures and tiles and whatever. And you know what? When you go over budget or something, like there's a massive leak or they find whatever, and you find, like, is that something that your personality is going to do well? And some say yes. Love builds, love the whole process. You don't work, this is your new project, all good, no problem. You have two very busy people with children in like after school activities and competitive and whatever. You've got a cottage, you're going to, good luck. Sorry, that's my spiel.
So that's very interesting. I'll just add to that and saying it really makes a difference under those dynamics and those family dynamics. If you're going to be renovating a home and you want to put a second or third floor on the home that you're living in at the same time the renovations are going on, that's going to create a lot of havoc, a lot of aggravation, as opposed to buying something and renovating while you're still living in a condo, you're renting a place, and you're divorced, from the home that you're building, from the home that you're living in, because it's really is a little bit remote, and you could deal with the problems a lot easier because it's not impacting your day-to-day life, and particularly if your children and getting up and going elsewhere. It's a real problem if you're doing renovations. You have to drape certain areas, so the dust and the noise, it really gets to be problematic. So you have to have a pretty solid relationship with your partners and your kids if you're going to go through that type of headache.
Yeah, it has to be a family decision, or you also budget into your line item of your overall plan that you're going to spend a certain amount of money on a rental. A lot of people, here you go, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 for the year. I know I'm going to go out, move out, and then I can go check on it, but I'm not going to be displaced. You're not going to be in your home, but it's
if the budget could afford it, certainly would be preferred.
Yes, different project for sure. A kitchen renovation, not so much. But I know people with kitchen move out. I remember when I was young, we did a kitchen renovation. We all had to go out the front door, down to the side door, and into the basement to have cold cereal every morning. And I'm 51 years old. I still remember that. It's all a big deal. So, you talk about personality. So talking about picking this contractor, like, do you think this is something you ask your friends about? Do you ask your lawyer about? Do you ask, do you go on HomeStars? Talk like that person who's just thinking about it. Where do they even start?
All the above.
Okay, great.
So once you make the process and you're going to be building and you have a budget, so by that time you're probably looking at magazines, you're looking at homes. I now live in Collingwood. There's tremendous amount of magazines out there in the market, on the Bay, Escarpment, Cottage Life. You're probably flipping through the pages, looking at some really good stuff, and you see contractor homes are being profiled in your neighborhood. You may say, oh, I'd like to have that, and I'd like to have them build it. So you look at those, mark them down. Referrals, clearly the best way. Okay, it's the gold standard. From referrals from friends, lawyers, your accountant, lawyers, doctors, friends, veterinarians, whoever it is that you know that you trust, that have built homes and you could talk to, get their referrals from who they've chosen, how do they interact, how good were the contractors in communicating with you in terms of making design changes, in terms of cost and budgeting, and also if there's disputes or try to avoid disputes, can you reasonably sit at a coffee shop and negotiate extras or complaints and get through it all. Because it's all about really relationships and communicate. It really is. At the end of the day,
I agree with you.
No matter where you are,
in
whatever
my
field you're in.
business too. I agree with you.
And
Yeah.
because other than that, it's going to be adversarial, aggravating, or you're not sure where you stand, and you don't want to, walk on eggshells because you're a contractor. What do you
it's
say?
your money.
It's your money. But
Your
they're,
home.
they're in control. They're building. It's really got to be what I would call a real, true symbiotic relationship, the best you can.
I agree. I would also say that as Canadians, as just in general, people are nice and they want to give people the benefit of the doubt. And well, he was kind of, or she was a little bit like this, but I'm sure it was fine or whatever. Go, and you said this before, and I truly believe this, go with your gut. There's a saying, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And I even say this to clients, in negotiations or, if someone is kind of acting like this now, what happens after, right? So, if I'm buying a house and they're giving me a hard time about you can only have one buyer visit after, I'm going to be like, oh, it's like a red flag to me, right? Like if you're offering them all this money and they're giving you a problem. So same, if you're getting into, and you can tell me if you disagree, but I've been in meetings where, I'll tell you my own experience, we thought about renovating our old home and we interviewed this architect who was referred to us. It was a woman duo. They came in lovely, very nice, and they said, okay, and we interviewed them. And towards the end, I asked them, I said, okay, so they said, well, we'll submit you a plan and you'll review it and then we'll move forward. And I said, okay, and what's the process for changes, And they said, well, there'll be no changes. And I said, pardon me. And they said, no, we create the plan that we believe is best for your house. And if you don't agree with that, then we're not the right people for you. And I said, that's right, you're not. So again, that's okay. And that's how they do their business. And there are people who might love that and they go, great, no problem, I'm in your hands. But those are the type of things where you're like, did they mean that? I'm sure they're fine. I'm sure they let me change something. No, if they said they won't, don't think that's going to change.
If they say they don't, there's a reason why they won't, for their own particular reasons. They also see the problems as well. So you raise a good point in terms of the architect. So there's two really ways, or probably more than that, where you could retain a contractor. Either you retain a contractor on your own after already having retained an architect or a consultant to do your drawings and your plans and preparing your specifications for materials and products. Okay, and then you have your architect, and by that time, after 6 or 7 months, you have a plan, you have it going, you have a budget going on, then you then say, okay, now I'm going to look for a contractor who can do this type of work for me, and then you look in all your magazines, and you go to your friends, and you get referrals, and you get a couple of contractors. You should always get 2 or 3 contractors, at least, to interview.
Okay.
And what's really critical is get them to allow you to go to homes that they've already built and speak to the homeowners.
Directly.
Without them there.
Yes.
Okay, and ask them, what's it like?
Yeah.
For communication, for extras, for going into the house as things are being
Follow
built.
up, yeah.
You take a look at this and you say, that doesn't look right. And maybe it isn't as opposed to being bullied.
Because once they have your money, if they're those people, they may not come back. Say, you know what, you're finished 6 months later. Hey, by the way, I have a leak or something's it's shifted, and they go, oh, well, that's not our problem, or whatever it is, right? So that's
okay, Rachel, you always keep on talking on all these different points, and they're so important.
Sorry.
All right, because the payment structure is really important for that very reason.
The holdback.
You don't want to pay too much. They want you to pay too much. You want to pay, it's either enough or a little bit too less than what they're doing, because you want to have money extra in the event there's problems or deficiencies,
right.
And you don't want to overpay, because when they have more money, they have the leverage, and they get right. And then if you have the money, you have the leverage. Then they're looking for money, and you're going to say, finish this, then you'll get this.
So very good point. So and great story segue. We built this house. We approached my agent at the time many years ago. Approached the builder. Who, by the way, ironically has been sued by everybody but myself who built in this area. So even then, okay. Anyway, and so I had a very good real estate lawyer and back then, Brian Tarrant. I don't know if you know Brian Tarrant. Anyway, so he made sure we had a proper holdback. all good, no problem. Deficiencies, he came, he was all over me to get the deficiencies so he could get his final. And I remember my lawyer going, make sure that you get everything because he's all over me for that money and it's a red flag, right? So I was getting great advice. Alternatively, I have very good friends that use the same builder and bought another house he was building. Their lawyer did not do a holdback and they got nothing fixed, same builder, and had to sue him and got nothing.
So this is where
Sued the lawyer.
my lawyering sort of is going to sort of add to that and modify what you just said.
Okay, please do.
But it's very legal oriented.
Yeah.
So under the Construction Act of Ontario, there's an obligatory statutory holdback of 10% of the value of the contract, which the owner and down the stream must retain, but it's not for your use as owner at all. It's for the use of all those who have not been paid down the construction pyramid stream by the contractor that you've chosen. And if it turns out that those down below the stream aren't paid and there's a lien against your property, they will scoop that holdback.
Wow.
Okay, and you'd be left with
didn't know
zero. Okay, so then you have what I called a contractual holdback over and above the statutory holdback. And it may not be much, 2%, 3%,
Right.
more than zero. Okay, then they're not going to get the cash flow that they want, but they have the incentive to get the work, and it may not give you enough money, but again, in terms of balancing the power play here, it helps. And 3% of $1 million contract is not so bad.
No, I agree with you. Everything counts at the end, like when you're
And it's
building
better
a house.
at the end of the day, if you're into problems, if you have an extra $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, it's better than zero.
So I have two questions that are actually not on here. One is, what do you think about, because you brought it up a little bit about like the architect versus the contractor. I think that's something that not everybody's always sure, like, is the contractor the first, point of contact? Because a lot of people go to a designer. Like if you go to an Alley Budd or a Tara Finegold, they want to be involved from moment one, and they have their contractors, or a Jody Rosen, right? So they all have their people. So you go and say, I want to build this new home. I want you to help me design it. And they have their trades. And we, in our business, and I know I've talked to builders and designers, it's a challenge when they don't know each other because there's a lot of finger pointing. Oh, well, they're not who I usually use. They're not listening to me. It was their fault. No, it's their fault. And then all of a sudden you got finger pointing and you're in the middle of it. And who the hell wants to be the parent in that situation?
I have a lot to say on that. Great. Excellent. So the first part would be if you're comfortable enough to hire your own architect and go through the process. And then once all that's said and done, you go look for your contractor. But you have to be a little bit more sophisticated and be comfortable, because you may result in a problem where the architect and the general contractor are at odds with one another, or the design isn't perfect and the contractor says it's the designer's fault, the architect's fault, the mechanical electrical engineer's fault, and so you're splitting liability, and then you end up getting people suing one another. It gets to be complicated,
yeah.
really, really aggravating,
Yeah.
and complicated. And when I say complicated, again, it's expensive, because you have to hire a lawyer, expensive. The other way is your way. Where you find your right contractor after doing all your due diligence, speak to all your friends, go visit the home, say this is the right contractor for me, everything looks good. You don't know what's behind the walls, but you have a good feeling, you go with your gut, the design looks good, the quality looks decent. You could always hire a consultant to go in, if you're allowed, and take a look at the quality of the work, if you don't know, because you're just a homeowner, and see what it's like. But if that builder has their own designer and their own trades that they've been working with in a long time, and you're comfortable, that is the easier way and is the less stressful way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big, again, this is not legal, this is just personal advice. I believe in hiring good people and letting them do good things. So I have a designer that I really love. I trust him implicitly. And so when I want to do something, he'll say to me, do you want, now I may have an electrician. I love Ellie, and he will only do he's the only guy who will ever do any electrical for me. That's where I step in and go, he's my only guy. Otherwise, if I need cabinets done, who do you have? Who do you trust? Because when he brings him in and there's an issue, he's going to fix it for me because he brought him in, because it was his recommendation. So I love giving, No problem. Same with me, by the way. You hire me, you ask me to, I own that. If I'm gonna bring a cleaner into your house, I'm gonna make sure they do an outstanding job because it's my name. And so there's no, like, I can't come in and go, oh, I'm sorry, your cleaner didn't clean it properly. Like, and at the end of the day, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but I have no control over it. So I can't help you because you chose to use that cleaner. So anyway, last question, not last question, but my next question is, so there's less people building houses right now, but there's something called Terry warranty that is used by builders to warrant that your home is properly built. It has a 3 year, is it 3 years of a warranty?
There's a sequence.
It's a tiers system?
2, 5, 7. 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, depending on the work that's being done.
Okay, thank you. And I know back in the heyday of new homes being built, there were guys that were building that you could buy from that had Terry on warranty. And then there were guys, like the guy that built this house, that only took it down to 3, left 3 walls, and it was called a renovation. And then you didn't need a Terry on warranty. You got around it as a new home. I've also been told by a real estate lawyer that a Terry on warranty is really not worth the money that it's paper it's printed on. Do you disagree or agree? What say you? Like, is that something you think someone needs from I mean, it's different from a builder, but I'm saying if you were to go buy an individual home that was being built versus renovated, what do you think?
So builders of new homes need to be registered.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So you don't have a choice.
Right.
So the question is, what's the value of having Terry on?
Yes.
And the answer is, when do you use it? You need it when you have this dispute or these deficiencies, 50, 60 deficiencies near the end of the project, and your contractor is not responding properly or is responding in a delayed way or not doing it right, and you have a problem with them. Mm-hmm. And then at some point in time, you're going to make a request to Tarion, put a notice in, and they'll get themselves involved. But typically, if the contractor is still surviving, it's solvent in business, and they want to continue and they want to maintain their reputation, they will go and fix it. Because at the end of the day, if Tarion has to go and do the things that the contractor should have done, they will get reimbursed from the contractor. And the contractor, depending on the circumstances, will likely have personal guarantees to Tarion, because Tarion will not want to lose money, government-oriented. Mm-hmm. So the Tarion is valuable in the sense where if the builder or developer, because there's also for deposits,
right,
things of that sort. If the contractor goes out of business, is bankrupt, is insolvent, then you want to get Tarion involved.
Right.
Okay.
That could be a whole other episode.
On bigger projects, on bigger numbers, we won't get into it today. It's just too complicated in terms of the time that we have. Mm-hmm. But if you have a large enough project, let's say it's a $5 million home or $10 million home, whatever you're doing, mm-hmm, you're going to be more sophisticated. But you may want to get a surety bond from the contractor, mm-hmm, that says that if he doesn't finish the work or he walks away or he goes bankrupt, you have protection. It's not Tarion, but it would be like a surety company, insurance company. It's called a performance bond.
Right.
But again, you're not dealing with a $5 million project every single day.
No.
You're mostly dealing with $1 million or $2 million of a project, dealing with that. Now, we didn't get to the picking the contractor completely. Didn't get there yet. Okay, and when you have that combined process where you're picking the contractor, yeah, you're also picking the designer at the same time, and so that the timing of that, you ask early, when do you choose? Yeah. You're going to do that pretty much very quickly when you're ready to go, and you look at all your magazines and you say, this is what we like, this is what we want. You know, we have a budget, we're ready to go, and that's when you're going to start choosing your contractor and interviewing 1 or 2 or 3 of them, because they're going to have their consultants. And you may want to interview the consultant, maybe not. As we were talking just before we began the interview, as I mentioned to you, I am building in a foreign country. Okay.
You're so brave.
Yeah, well, I'm building in Costa Rica, but I'm building it far away. And it's one contractor with his designer, mechanical, electrical consultants, all one. Mm-hmm. I'm putting it all under his banner. Okay, and he's been terrific. Yes, he knows I'm a construction lawyer. All right.
I'm sure you started the conversation off that way too.
Yeah, I think it was my second, third line.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But he's been great. And we do have great communication. He sends me pictures every week and we communicate every week where things are. It does a lot of rain. So again, communication, relationships, it's critical to deal with that. The contract doesn't make a difference. If they're going to make a mess, or they're going to throw you under the bus, they're going to do it with a contract, without a contract, force you to hire a lawyer, trust that you won't want to take it to the distance, spend all kind of money. There's people out there like that. They'll push your buttons.
There are. And I actually think that's a great segue, because I want to wrap up with all of that information. If you've now gone through all the process of like choosing the right person, getting your referrals, and it just goes south, and now you're at the point and you're like, do I have to sue? What is that advice that you give someone? Because I have a really great real estate lawyer that I deal with, Joel Kadish, who always says to me, he goes, as soon as you sue, everyone loses. But there are times where you have to do it. So what is that, like, where is that point where you would advise someone and say, you know what, it's time to litigate?
When you can't sleep at night.
Oh God, well then that's the majority of us.
When you really kept up at night. Again, it's a situation is, how much money do you want to spend to fight? And you don't know, so you'll need to retain, or at least have an advice from a lawyer. People come to me all the time, here's my problem. If it's a $20,000, $30,000 problem, you don't need me. Okay, don't even need one of my juniors. Okay, solve it. Okay, split the baby in half or walk away. Okay, and have a clean slate. So true. Okay, it's just, there's a point in time, even at the higher numbers, where it's a point in time when you take a look at the expense of litigation, sometimes it's just cheaper just to pay it out, bite the bullet, and move on.
For your own health also.
Okay?
Yeah.
I can tell you, I act for insurance companies in many ways in terms of the construction projects and the like, and we go to all the time, and they want this assessment of me and what the future legals are. And just to give you a simple example, just a couple of months ago, we were trying to settle this case, and I thought our liability was zero, and the other side wanted a bunch of money. And she said, well, what will it cost to take us to the finish line? And I said, somewhere between $300,000 to $400,000. She said, is that conservative? I said, yeah, it's conservative, but we'll get close, give or take $100,000, insurance company. Yeah. And so she settled and paid a lot more money than zero, because I'd rather pay them than pay you and not know what the outcome will be at the end of the day.
This was the insurance company?
The insurance company.
I'm actually really shocked that the insurance company did that.
Well, I have a long-time relationship. They know me and they know how we negotiate, and they were in the room at the same time, and it was an all day. At the end of the day, I have to give the assessment and my ruling, even though it was zero. Said, well, if we could close our books, get rid of it, we could settle it this way, then I'll pay.
No, I'm sure they trust you. I just always think those big corporations have deep pockets, and they're like, we'll mitigate the risk. We'll go for it.
There are times when they can. It all depends on the liability and assessment that they get from the lawyer involved and how accurate it is. So it's really important to do that.
I think that's a really great way to also wrap up. Make sure that you're always dealing with people that you know that are on the same page as you, that come referred. And, junior or not, I would also say someone who's got a good amount of experience in different aspects of it is also really important, I think, when you get into serious matters like that. So, if your cousin's, nephew just got into being a contractor, maybe let him do your basement bathroom, but let him, but don't let him build your home. And that goes with lawyers, real estate agents, all of it. I believe that, what you get paid for is your experience. And when something really serious happens, or you're invoking into a very serious project, choose an experienced contractor, choose an experienced lawyer, choose an experienced realtor. It's very unusual that I hear of people who have been working with someone who's got, a good reputation, been doing it a long time, that prides themselves on, the hard work that they've done, that gets recruited for all their jobs, that has any issues. So, Len, it was an honor. It was such a lovely discussion. I feel like we could sit here all afternoon and chat also, which we have on many calls to get prep for this, but I welcome you back and hope that we have a part two.
Thank you, Rachel. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to come back. There's lots more.
So much. I want to do the pre-construction. I want to do all. There's so many things we can
There
talk
are
about.
so many things. We even talk about contracts and how important that is.
We didn't, but we will do a part 2 and maybe a part 3. Thank you
Looking
very
forward to
much.
it. Thank you so
Thanks.
much.